Welcome to a bonus episode of Window Dressing. I'm Madelaine Jane Albel. This week, I have a special treat, inspired by my house guest, Elliott the cat. Elliott has been with me this last week, so in honor of his short stay, I'm going to talk about The Long Goodbye, starring Elliott Gould and his orange cat. The book on which it is based was first published in 1953 and was the sixth in Raymond Chandler's detective series featuring Philip Marlowe. It was adapted for the screen in 1973 by famed female fiction writer and screenwriter Leigh Brackett, whose credits also include the 1946 film noir The Big Sleep, directed by Robert Altman and with cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond, whose work is credited with crafting the look of the 1970s in film. The Long Goodbye was the height of neo-noir and part of what I consider to be one of the best periods in American film. It is also a quintessentially Los Angeles story, primarily filmed in the city at landmark locations with symbolism aligned with the very heart of this town. An example of one such location is Philip Marlowe's apartment. The still-standing high tower court apartments are situated in the Hollywood Heights neighborhood near the Hollywood Bowl. The tower containing the elevator that leads to the apartment was built in 1920. The high tower court apartments themselves were built in the 1930s. Both carry the magic of yesteryear, along with the signs of decay that the once great studio system was going through at the time of the making of this film. Marlowe has an orange cat, whose defining characteristic is brand loyalty, specifically Curry brand cat food. Nothing more American than that, especially in the town where the Marlboro Man loomed over Sunset Boulevard until 1999. Marlowe goes to get Curry brand cat food, with the opening credits and theme going strong. The title song, The Long Goodbye, goes from cinematic to elevator-toned once Marlowe enters the neighborhood market. This simple transition is much like the city itself, mundane consumerism made from the stars in the sky. When Marlowe asks the clerk where the Curry brand cat food is, he replies with something to the effect of, "They are all the same." Marlowe points out that he must not have a cat. The clerk says, "What I need a cat for, I got a girl." But this clerk would be wise to take note. Marlowe is one of the best male cat owners around, and the model for what women want, besides equality and cats of their own. Once he arrives home from the store, he puts the off-brand cat food in the Curry-branded cat food can. He loves his cat. But being a cat who does not suffer fools kindly, the cat won't eat the counterfeit stuff. He goes for a midnight stroll, leaving his dad to greet an unexpected guest. The cat is played by one of two different cat actors, one named Morris and another named Chauncey Scratchit. The true identity of Marlowe's cat hides behind the mysterious boundaries of the most trusted test of character around, an orange cat. Terry Lennox, a cross between a friend and a foe, shows up at Marlowe's apartment with what appears to be a cat scratch on his cheek. The feline-like injury came from his wife, Sylvia. He asks Marlowe to drive him to the border, which he does. If that seems excessive, keep in mind it's very close. Marlowe drives a gorgeous green 1948 Lincoln Continental, which gives him a stylish, if not fading, glory. The car was Elliott Gould's own. Adding to the window dressing of Marlowe's life are a group of hippie girl neighbors who frequently walk around topless as part of the city's scenery. He treats them with respect, another rarity of character in this town. The cops come to arrest Marlowe in connection with the death of Terry Lennox's wife, Sylvia Lennox, who was beaten to death, likely by Terry. During their interrogation, the cops accuse Marlowe of being a fag because of the E on the end of his name. This is a solid dragnet-style accusation. LA cops never trust a long-haired affiliated private dick. When he is released, they tell him that it's because Terry Lennox is dead now too. Marlowe returns a call from a prospective client at his local piano bar, a Mrs. Wade, who just so happens to live in the Malibu colony, the same neighborhood as his supposedly dead friend and his definitely dead wife. The colony, formerly known as the Movie Colony, is storied. It was one of the original hubs of the film industry and the first neighborhood in Malibu. The colony began in 1926 with the first lease of the land. May Ringe and her husband purchased all 13,000 acres of what we now think of as Malibu in 1892 and built their home and cattle ranch on it. The area was originally Chumash land and was called Himalaya, which later became Malibu. The land passed into May's sole ownership in 1903, upon her husband Frederick's death. May fought tooth and nail to keep the Santa Fe Pacific Railway from building a coastal track through Malibu, and later she fought the state and county to keep a highway off her land. She lost that fight, nearly bankrupting her and leading to the construction of the Pacific Coast Highway and the first leases of her land, which became Malibu Colony. The colony was called the Chateau Marmont on the beach. I use the past tense because the chateau is now littered with conmen and Canadians, which sullies that comparison. Some of the homes in the colony were said to have ocean water continuously pumped into their pools. But from what I can tell, the only home still standing that had one of these ocean pumps is the Adamson House, near but not in the colony. That home was built in 1931 or 1929, depending on your source, and was one of the last historical sites left in Malibu. Unsurprisingly, given nature's delight in destroying its most beautiful locales. Pool pumps aside, the first residents of the colony were silent film stars. It is still filled with fame, exclusivity, and the closest thing to private beaches you get in California. A gatehouse protects the community from the encroaching weekenders and others who might threaten the privacy of its residents. By the 1970s, in this film, the gate man did impressions, like Jimmy Stewart, a great addition to the recycled romance of this town. The sharp edges meet the plush poodle, or wire fox terrier as it were, when Marlowe stops his 1948 Lincoln short to avoid hitting a dog that runs in front of the car. He honks and says, "Get out of the way, Asta." Asta is the dog from the Thin Man series, a Hollywood heyday film series starring Myrna Loy and William Powell, and of course, their dog, Asta, played by Skippy. A coyote trots across the street after the Asta lookalike. That is LA, where the wild and beautiful mingle to create magic. Last week, I saw a bobcat hop from my yard to my neighbor's. The neighbor is a former Disney actress who wears different wigs every day and routinely screams things like, "I'm going to get the knife," to her mob-connected brother in the middle of the night. I love this town. Marlowe rings the guest entrance bell of a home that is the height of Malibu country chic. The house is Altman's own. The doorbell rings a few bars of the movie's title song before the mistress of the house calls for Marlowe to come in. The location of Altman's home is incredibly difficult to pin down because AI has ruined the internet. But I have. The address is 23844 Malibu Road. Altman had a different Malibu home after that one, just down the street at 25124 Malibu Road. That home was built in 1981 and sold this year. His new client, Eileen Wade, is a gorgeous blonde hippie sophisticate with a deep tan and large attack dogs. She is played by Nina Van Pallant, a Danish actress and singer. She was actually a calypso singer with her husband Frederick Baron Van Pallant, but they separated in 1969 and divorced in 1976. He was shot to death in a drug trafficking incident in the early 1990s. That life story is so Malibu sophisticate, I can barely contain myself. But wait, there is more. Around the time The Long Goodbye was made, she was romantically involved with a man named Clifford Irving. He fabricated a meeting with Howard Hughes that resulted in Hughes' dictated autobiography, or so said Clifford. Nina helped the FBI prove this was a lie in their investigation into the reported meeting and subsequent book. Eileen Wade comes down the stairs with a glorious crown of shining blonde hair and a floor-length baby blue gingham and floral cotton dress. A perfect look for a near-perfect woman. Her hair has some height in the back and a sunshiny sheen. The color is the kind of blonde that only the Malibu sun produces. Her lips are peachy pale, her eyes shadowed in frosty white. Her tan is so deep that her skin looks warm to the touch. She has a nasty bruise hiding under her hair on her cheek. The battered wife of a famous writer, an alcoholic who can no longer write. She has been one of my personal icons since childhood. She really influenced my idea of adulthood and beauty. It's no shock to me that her wardrobe in this film is mostly her own. Her well-cultivated sense of style fits the role and the locale perfectly. Nina Van Pallant's look as Eileen is a style signature of hippie sophistication comparable to women like Michelle Phillips, Peggy Lipton, Sharon Tate, and Malibu Barbie. The latter debuted in 1971 and is said to be inspired by Sharon Tate's character Malibu in the 1967 film Don't Make Waves. That matters because the aesthetic of these women are not divorced from the brutality of the place and time they came from. Malibu itself only exists because of an over-leveraged land sale and a lost Supreme Court case that gave us the access we now have via the PCH. Sharon was brutally murdered by Charles Manson's followers in 1969, and both Michelle Phillips and Peggy Lipton faced years of exploitation and mistreatment at the hands of the culture they, in part, epitomized. Barbie is actually the only one on that list that made it out unscathed and with a modern hit movie. Where we are now isn't so different from where this country was in 1973. Moral decay along with wild exploitation and hatred of women mixed with newfound freedoms abound. It's no wonder I find this film so resonant now, and that a mid-century genre, such as noir, found a resurgence in the 1970s. It seems cultural and political discontent are the only things we can rely on, except for fires, floods, and wife beaters. Still, the house, wardrobe, and hair color of this particular femme fatale give me hope. The house itself has whitewashed brick walls intermingled with white wood paneling, and gorgeous floor-to-ceiling windows almost everywhere you look. There is a Gothic Revival chandelier and many, many plants. It's the perfect Malibu home, and it's filled with near-perfect decor. Many of the items used to set dress the house were Elliott Gould's in real life. The space features white curtains pulled back, dark wood furniture, a sunflower-upholstered chair, a piano, and ample seating areas. I would die to live in this house. It's my life's dream. Eileen and her home are the absolute paragon of what a young Madelaine wanted for herself. I didn't consider the abusive partner part. I do remember considering Marlowe as part of the deal, though. The use of Altman's home, Elliott's stuff, and Nina's wardrobe perfectly reflects a book written in 1953 about a town made into a film set in current-day 1973 Hollywood. which deeply influenced a writer and cultural critic with a special knowledge of fashion history who was born in 1985. The latter is me. Meta would be the word most would use, but I'll call it manufactured magic by way of realism. The talk between Marlowe and Eileen Wade mainly consists of her acting like they know each other, with brief descriptions and contradictory complaints, the kind a friend would be able to understand, but creates confusion in an already awestruck PI. She says things like, "He always does this," referring to her husband's disappearance, but also, "This time is different." Marlowe takes note of the bruise on her cheek. You can tell he doesn't particularly think her husband is good enough for her, or at least that's what I think he thinks. But he agrees to find Mr. Wade. Before Marlowe leaves, he asks her if she knows the Lennoxes, the murdered wife and possibly dead husband who also lived in the colony. Eileen says, "Only slightly." Marlowe finds Eileen's husband in one day. He is home later that night, in fact. Mr. Roger Wade was hiding away at a private hospital owned by his doctor and all-around quack, Dr. Veringer. Henry Gibson plays Veringer. He went on to play the murderous Dr. Klopek in the 1989 film The Burbs. There was minimal deviation in character type between those two roles. The private hospital in Malibu is somewhere between a chic rehab and a sprawling grounds psych ward. It seems nice until you realize you are a prisoner of your own devices. Actually, come to think of it, it more closely resembles the Hotel California than the previous examples. Marlowe creeps around the property, finding Roger in his room being extorted by the kind doctor. Marlowe presses his nose against the screen window and advises Roger not to sign that check, but to come home with him instead. And so the ultra-simple job is completed with humor and a nod to the seemingly simplistic trap of addiction. But Eileen's husband's quick return does not sever Marlowe's connection to Wade's wife so simply. That same night, when Marlowe returns to his Hollywood Hills Tower apartment, we trade a battered wife story for a gangster mall's humiliation rite. Mr. Marty Augustine, played by Mark Rydell, and his gang of ill-mannered but jovial hoods are waiting. Along for the ride is Marty's soft and sweet girlfriend Joanne, played by Joanne Brody. She is wearing a peach chiffon dress with a capelet at the shoulders and a flowing miniskirt. Her hair is soft, reddish-brown, and she is what I like to call broken brain sweet. She has the kind of innocence that is groomed and brainwashed into being. They leave her in the car, and Marty says she can listen to the radio if she gets bored. It's not so much a suggestion as it is permission. She turns it on after they carry a half-beaten-up Marlowe up to his elevator apartment. The Long Goodbye plays in stereophonics out of the car's radio. Once upstairs, we find out that Marty thinks Marlowe has money that belongs to him, money that was supposed to be delivered to Mexico City by Marlowe's friend and possible murderer and maybe dead Terry Lennox. Despite his denials, the gang continues its assault. Marty talks quite a lot about what a big man he is, including a story about living across from Nixon and playing tennis regularly. I don't think I need to explain why bragging about proximity to Nixon is questionable. But just as damning is the tennis brag. We all know that tennis is for cheaters and phonies. If I were Marty, I would not be bragging about it. Lily Allen's ex played tennis with his side piece, and my ex plays tennis with some idiot he is using for proximity to power whom he met on a night out with a group of showgirls whom he leveraged for that proximity, all while we were dating. A knock at the door alarms the entire group. It's Joanne. She got scared because she heard a noise outside of the car. She asks for a Coke. Marty ushers her in and sits her down on the sofa next to Marlowe. He gets her a nearly empty bottle of Coke. He comments on how beautiful her face is. He says, "You're beautiful, and I love you. I do." He proceeds to smash the glass bottle of Coke across her face. She screams. Blood gushes all over her pretty peach chiffon dress. They rush her out of the apartment with a sheet on her face to soak up all that blood. All the while, she is crying like a wounded kitten. Marty says to Marlowe, "That's someone I love. You, I don't even like. Find my money." The brutalized face of a lovely young woman is a classic scene of 1950s noir. But shot with the realism of the 1970s, it takes on a modernized air of helter-skelter-esque brutality that feels immediate. A woman's face is sort of her bread and butter, especially when she is a gangster's moll. Slashing or burning the very thing that gives her value to the perpetrator is a clear-cut example of why violence against women is a hate crime. It's the same instinct as destroying the toy you love when you're angry as a child. Your love for the thing is the very reason you destroy it. It gives you power, a power that is called hate, not to mention exploitation. When a woman is easily comparable to a toy, the latter is implicit. When I mention burn as an example, I'm referring to the 1953 film noir The Big Heat. Gloria Graham plays the brutalized gangster's moll in that movie. Her face is burned with hot coffee, permanently disfiguring her. She is literally marked as a disposable piece of property. A more modern example of this in culture that feels like an obvious evolution of this behavior is marking or branding a woman the way cult figures and pimps do. Or I guess getting them to do it themselves, as is the case with internet groups and incel types. Marlowe manages to give the guy who has been instructed to watch him the slip and follows the car that Marty and Joanne are in. He follows them all the way to Eileen Wade's Malibu home, which is a long drive to subject a nearly fatally injured young girl to. Joanne gets out of the car while Marty is inside the house. She is covered with blood and sobbing. A car comes by, almost hits her, honks, and drives around her bloody, desperate figure. That couldn't be closer to my experience with the general public when a woman is in need if I had written it myself. That car would be more likely to stop for the dog that looks like Asta than a bloodied young woman. In fact, Marlowe took more notice of the coyote that crossed his car's path than this driver took of her. Inside the house, Eileen is talking to Marty, wearing a floor-length lace and chiffon nightdress in pale pink. All the while, Joanne's peach chiffon dress drips with her own blood just outside the garden gate. I assume that the film's costume designer, Marjorie Walls, was behind the choice of blush versus blood chiffon, even if Nina was wearing her own dress. It sends a powerful message about disposability. Love doesn't save you, ladies. Cash does, the kind Eileen has, and Joanne doesn't. The next day, Marlowe goes back to the colony. Today, her husband, Roger, answers the door. He is a garish caricature of an alcoholic writer if I have ever seen one. But the addition of addiction is just as necessary as smog in the skyline to a Hollywood story. Eileen, on the other hand, is the perfect Malibu woman, wearing a crisp, white cotton dress with a high neck, poofed short sleeves, and several layers of ruffles at the knee-length hem. Her hair is pulled back, and her straw hat is fucking perfect. Ineffable, even. The shot is of her and her husband fighting. Reflected in the large picture window, you can see palm trees, Marlowe walking on the beach, and the husband and wife's row. This fight is boring, but her lips are a lively peach like a bird of paradise petal, and her hair is twisted in the back and pinned. She implies that he is impotent, and he almost hits her, but instead screams in her face. Another cowardly act, although a slightly more socially acceptable one considering they have a guest. He says, "Why don't you call the Marlboro man in here?" Marlowe is the Marlboro Man he is referring to. He is the last gasp of the American cowboy, with a decent heart and a functioning moral compass. The two men sit down and talk about Marty Augustine, Terry Lennox, and his dead wife. But the undercurrent is the question of whether Marlowe and Eileen are sleeping together. Roger seems somewhat satisfied that he doesn't care either way, and the two men get on rather well. Nothing goes together as well as cigarettes and booze, after all. Marlowe receives a $5,000 bill in the mail from Mexico, courtesy of his supposedly dead friend Terry Lennox. He heads down to Mexico to verify Terry's death with the Mexican authorities. He comes across a two-man team that acts as the law, the coroner, the doctor, the undertaker, and the photographer. They promise Terry is, in fact, dead. They are obviously lying, although with less brutality and more charm than the Americans. He leaves the funeral procession vibes for the upbeat yet equally dark party at Eileen and Roger Wade's Malibu home. The hostess, Eileen, is wearing a pale yellow and pale pink chiffon gown with generous bell sleeves and a cult-like hood in the back. It's truly beautiful on her, with her hair and her coloring. The sleeves make her look like an angel of the sexual revolution, Beach and Canyon brand. She is truly magnificent. Her cheeks glow tangerine through her tanned, warm skin. Her eyeshadow is a pale, bluddery blue. Her mascara is ample, and her naturally straight blonde hair makes her look like Malibu incarnate. The perfect addition to this outfit is the bubblegum pink heels I imagine her to kick off to frolic in the sand when she is finally alone. Shoes that are probably hers to wear in real life. A look like this could not be anything other than authentically cultivated through years of perfecting one's personal style. Dr. Veringer shows up at the party demanding his money. After a strange and pathetic row, Roger mumbles incoherently and writes the check. This ends up looking like a bought and paid for alibi by the end of the night. A night that also sees Roger Wade dead and Marlowe and his hostess stinking drunk and suddenly at odds. Roger walks into the water, drowning himself, leaving a widowed but free woman to go where she will, which, unremarkably, is straight into the arms of another abusive man. They seem to be difficult to avoid, then, now, and always. For his part, Marlowe is convinced that Roger killed Terry's wife. Eileen doesn't contradict his story. And a drunk, blanket-wrapped Marlowe stumbles off the beach and out of Malibu. He ends up in the lion's den. He goes straight to Marty's wood-paneled villain's lair, equipped with a massive amount of muscle, including Arnold Schwarzenegger and a bandaged Joanne. She has traded in the chiffon for a cotton yellow frock. She looks like a paper rose where a real one once was. There is a brief game of strip to prove honesty that ends with Marty finding and then giving back the $5,000 bill Marlowe has in his possession. The money that is owed to Marty is conveniently returned, making Marlowe free to leave and free of the threat of death at the hands of a psychopath and his team of governators. Eileen Wade just so happens to be passing in her cream Mercedes convertible at the very moment Marlowe is leaving Marty's lair. Of course, Eileen drives a cream Mercedes. It's the car of the best women around. I had one, and Ginger from Casino had one. As for the coincidence of their locations, LA can be a small town when murder, mayhem, and blonde femme fatales from Malibu are concerned. Marlowe chases her car like a dog. It's probably the most attractive act I have seen a man partake in since John Clute took care of Bree Daniels' post-heroin binge in the 1971 film Clute. In true LA fashion, Eileen has a vanity plate that reads, "Love you," Marlowe gets hit by a passing car in his pursuit and is rushed to the emergency room. I would say he was playing out of his league if he wasn't the new age's answer to the rough and rugged Marlboro man. A cowboy in a suit, a private dick without a girl is the bar for a decent man. I mean, have you seen his orange cat? When Marlowe leaves the hospital, he goes straight to Eileen's Malibu home. She isn't there, and the house is already being cleared and staged for sale. He has a hunch and a former friend to find. Marlowe goes back down to Mexico to find Terry, who he now knows is alive. He uses the $5,000 bill to bribe the men who gave a falsified account earlier. Walking down a pine-lined street smoking a cigarette, still in his rumpled Marlboro man of the New Age suit and burgundy tie, he comes to a wooden gate, behind which is a waterfall and a stone ruin surrounded by jungle. There he finds his friend lying in a hammock next to a stream. Terry is only mildly shocked to see Marlowe and offers him a drink in the convenient outdoor bar setup he has next to his hammock. Marlowe says, "So you murdered your wife, huh, Terry?" Terry explains how his wife found out about the affair he was having with Eileen. He says by way of explanation, "I hit her. I didn't try to kill her. I hit her. I didn't mean it. She didn't give me any choice." Marlowe says, "She didn't give you much choice, huh?" Terry responds, "What the hell? Nobody cares." "Yeah, nobody cares but me," says Marlowe. Marlowe shoots Terry dead like a fucking dog, upholding the morality that seems only to be a slogan for cigarettes. After the justifiable homicide, Marlowe walks back down the tree-lined road, passing Eileen Wade on his way. She has come to her lover's side, the wife-murdering and now dead Terry. Marlowe skips down the path as "Hooray for Hollywood" plays him off. It's nice to know that some people may pass through the hallowed halls of Hollywood, but they are not allowed to stay, whereas men like Marlowe live on in the hearts and mind of those of us with stars in our eyes. And my hunch is his orange cat will be waiting in his Hollywood Hills apartment when he gets home, now that the truth has been upheld and avenged. This is Madelaine Jane Auble saying, don't turn your back on a cowboy in a rumpled suit, and try not to beat your wife to death. Thank you for listening to Window Dressing. Please like, subscribe, and rate this podcast wherever you are listening. And follow me on Instagram at Window Dressing Podcast for more content. Long live the Marlboro Man, and God bless Hollywood.